Hey, happy new day, family. This is my second podcast. I want to thank all of you for the comments that you made, suggestions that were made, and that's going to make me an even better podcaster, if there's such a word. But today, before I go any further, let me say Happy New Day, Grand Rising to all of you. It is truly a wonderful day. We woke up this morning in good health and strength. And I can't tell you how happy I am to be able to come before you and the fact that you want to listen to what I have to say. Well, today we're going to talk about honoring the ancestors and why ancestry is so important. But before we go any further in honoring the ancestors, excuse me, first and foremost, I give all honor, praise, and glory to our Mother, Father, Creator, and to the memory of our great African ancestors, whose shoulders we stand upon, whose backs we lean upon, and whose shoulders have held us up until this day. I've had some wonderful, wonderful experiences with the ancestors. And at One Africa, which, as most of you know, is our piece of paradise, we have the presence of ancestors all around us. When people come into our place, they say that they feel something that they don't feel when they go to other establishments. And that's because One Africa is special. One Africa has been blessed by the universe, blessed by the ancestors. And we find ourselves geographically situated between two major edifices, the Cape Coast Castle Dungeons and the Elmina Castle Dungeons, which held our ancestors. And they're there. Let me give you a little story, show you why I believe, or not even believe, I know the power of the ancestors. Before I came to Ghana, we go through a lot of things in our lives, challenges, illnesses, marriages, deaths, the whole nine yards. My first encounter with the ancestors was I was very, very sick. And I had just lost my father. And my family had gone out to get a doctor because I was so sick. I called on my father. I talked to him. And all of a sudden, a cool breeze blew across my body. And when my mother came back, my fever was gone and I was able to get out of bed. That was my first encounter. The second time, when I almost died, the ancestors came to me again and they touched me. The doctors had said to my mother, the only thing that you can do for her is that you can pray, because we've done everything medically that we can do for her. And I called on my ancestors, those who had gone on before me. And when I came out of that coma, people around me said, I never heard anybody pray the way that you prayed. And during that turmoil period, there was a nurse that stayed with me for the night. My fever was so high that they had to submerge me in ice. And the next morning, I was better. And I told my mother about it, and I wanted to thank that person who had stayed with me through my crisis. And no one knew who she was. So when I talk about ancestors, for me, for many of us, they're real. And who are ancestors? Ancestors are those who've gone on before us. At some point, we'll be ancestors. In fact, some of us, I believe, are living, walking ancestors. The spirit of the ancestors is on us. So, jumping years ahead, when I first came to Ghana, and two fishermen asked me, and they, by the name of Matthew and John, and I know some people say, yeah, right. No, their real name is Matthew and John. In fact, they still live in Ghana. So they came and they asked me, would you like to visit our village? And I thought to myself, why not? I'd never been to Africa before in my life. So yes, I wanted to visit their village. So on our way to the village, we stopped at what is now One Africa. And I remember we stopped just before then, and there was an old man who they said was the caretaker. Well, it was a vacant building. It didn't have any windows, didn't have any doors, but he was the caretaker. And then we went next door to what is now One Africa. And when I stood there, something came over me, similar to what I felt when I went into the castle dungeons. When I went into the Cape Coast Castle dungeons and communed with my ancestors, with all of these women that touched me, when I walked out of there, I knew that I would never be the same person again. So standing there on what I call hallowed ground between those two major edifices, I knew this is where I want to spend the rest of my life. And I asked the ancestors, please, if you give me this, I will be an obedient servant. Tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it if you give me this. Well, I visited the village. I finally went back to America, talked to my husband about moving to Africa. And, his response to me at that time was, oh, there you go again. Now you want to move to Africa. You went to Jamaica. You wanted to live in Jamaica. You went to South America. You want to live in South America. Now you come here talking about you want to move to Africa. And I said, yes, I really do. I felt it. So I sent him in December for his birthday to Ghana. And when he came back, trust me, the brother was ready like Freddie. Okay. And we traveled back and forth to Africa, to Ghana, for a couple of years. When we finally moved to Ghana, my husband had been made a chief. When he first told me that he was going to be a chief, I was like, chief, man, what you know about being a chief? Well, they made him a chief. And the reason that they made him a chief is that he said he saw this group of people, and it was Saturday, and he was a Sabbath observer, that they were going to make him a chief. Why? Well, what he volunteered to do, he thought they were having church, and it wasn't church. They were having a fundraiser. They were raising money to put electricity in our village of Itri. So being the kind of man that he was, he said, look, I'll help you. I don't know how much it's going to cost, but you let me know what it is and I'll tell you what I can do. The bottom line was that he was able to help put electricity for the first time in the village of Itri. So when we came back to Ghana, the custom is if you're a chief, queen mother, you have to let your people know that you're there. Well, we went to the village, and lo and behold, I knew everyone in that village. They didn't know the connection between my husband and I. We had a real reunion. And then he said, come, baby, I want to take you to the land that they gave me when they made me a chief. Imagine what must have gone through my mind and the joy that was in my heart when the land that they had given him when they made him a chief was the same land that I asked the ancestors for in 1987. And in 1990, I was standing in that place that the ancestors had given to me. You can't tell me that ancestors don't work for us. They do. I had a beautiful place that the ancestors had given me, given us. I was between two major edifices that had held our ancestors. And we were at the center of the earth, 0 degrees latitude and 0 degrees longitude. And I am an obedient servant. And what had been put on my heart, I mean, after I got to Africa and saw that they had sorely lied to us. And that's not to say that all of Africa is perfect, because it isn't. We got 54 countries, and God only knows how many languages. But what was happening as we lived there, people that I didn't know, people would come into our yard. They said there was something there that resonated with them. People would come and bring things. Can I bury this here? Or I have some ashes. Can I can I put these ashes here? And it came a time where I had to say to people, listen, first of all, this is not a cemetery, okay? And if you want to sprinkle the ashes of your loved ones, we will gladly take you to sea and bury them there, which we have done. But we also have the remains of quite a few ancestors. There was a woman who was coming to Ghana. She and her husband had gotten married in Egypt. He went out to work one day and he didn't come back. Someone had accidentally shot him. She found out when the police showed up to say, this is the home of the deceased. So her trip to Ghana was delayed. She had also recently lost a baby. I met her aunt when I visited New York. And when she told me the story about how her niece had lost a baby, her husband had died, and 3 months after his death, she found out that she was pregnant. Ancestors. Well, someone brought his ashes to Ghana. And how they came to us, it was hard to say. But a friend of hers brought the ashes, and we allowed her to bury those ashes at One Africa. We prayed to the ancestors, we prayed to God, we prayed to whomever had the power. And then the sister left after we had buried him. And to this day, I've never heard from her again. However, visiting New York, I happened to run into a young woman who was telling me a story about her and her husband and how her husband is buried someplace in Ghana And she'd like to know where he is because she would like for her and the daughter to visit his gravesite. Lo and behold, his remains were buried at One Africa. I never met this woman before. I met her auntie. And sure enough, she came to One Africa. So, as I said, I mean, the things that have happened, the things that I can testify to as far as our ancestors are concerned are real. One of the reasons that we're also living in Africa has to do with another ancestor, the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. He said that Africa was for Africans, those at home and those abroad. And it's because of the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey and others that we made our home in Africa, in Ghana. So I've had too many or so many experiences where my ancestors have played such a big part in my life. We have to call them. We have to know that they are there for us. And whatever your religion, the ancestors are a paramount part of our lives. I could tell you many other ancestors' stories or ancestors' truths, but I just want you to think about it. Think about them. Remember them in your prayers. Remember them when you're blessing your food. Remember that they are as real as you are. Someone asked me, to tell them about ancestors. And I have, based on my own experiences. When people come to our place, they feel the presence. They feel the vibrations. And when I look into that ocean, the Gulf of Guinea, when I look to the west at the Elmina Castle dungeons, when I look to the east at the Cape Coast Castle dungeons, I see and feel the presence of my ancestors. I'm not a witch, okay? Somebody might say so, but I'm not. But in my heart of hearts, I know where my power lies. And I share it with all of you. That which was put on my shoulders by my ancestors was to bring as many of her children home as possible. Some people will listen and others won't. But I'm happy to say that enough of you have listened, not just to me, but you've heard the words of the ancestors. And whether you recognized it or not, it was ancestors that were calling you to come back home. So I'm going to cut this short. I got 99 stories that I could tell you. Okay. Living in Ghana, living in Africa, living in Ghana for the past 30 plus years has not always been easy, but it truly has been a blessing. I've been blessed because I've met so many of you over the years. I've been able to touch you, and you have certainly touched me. And if I'm not doing it the way it should be done, please feel free to tell me. So, in closing, I would just like to thank all of you for your support. And please don't forget to subscribe, okay, to my YouTube channel. I forgot to say that before. But yes, please subscribe. If you have topics that you'd like me to cover, I'd be glad to do that. And since I'm not in Ghana any longer, I'm now in Rwanda, please feel free to come and see something different. You know, the difference between the East and the West. I was in the West, I'm now in the East. I went from the ocean to the mountains. So come and see. See what I'm doing. Come and see what you can do. Just on a side note, I do have a project. My project is to economically empower women who are survivors of the 1994 genocide. And we're doing pretty good. These are women who had no hope, had no skills, and we have worked together now for the past 2.5 years. And what they've done is absolutely amazing. So I'm going to say, see you next time.
I'm coming into the screen to end it.